Okay, good morning. Thank you very much. This is the SCRIP Roundtable, which is going to be focusing on the scientific, commercial challenges, opportunities associated with the orphan diseases space. We've seen plenty of news showing that there's a great deal of interest among the pharmaceutical companies who are moving into this space, and we thought it'd be a good opportunity to actually have a discussion against some of the stakeholders who are involved, and that's why we've invited you to attend this roundtable, and I'm very pleased to invite you to do so. My name is Mike Ward. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of SCRIP Intelligence. I will be moderating this session. What I'd like now to do is if you could actually introduce yourselves and again give us a sort of an outline of your own sort of personal background in the orphan diseases space, essentially to sort of highlight why you're sitting around this table. So if we start with you, Theresa.
Sure, I'm Theresa Heggie. I'm Head of Commercial Operations for Shire Human Genetic Therapies. Been involved in the area of rare diseases for about 7 years, first with TKT and then more recently with Shire following the acquisition. We are involved in a range of rare diseases, a real focus on lysosomal storage disorders, hereditary angioedema, and then more recently through a collaboration with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. And really pleased to be here, so thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Pat Furlong. I'm president of Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy. This is a nonprofit organization in the U.S., often referred to as PPMD. And I started in 1984 when my 2 boys were diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I ran around the world to understand what we could do to save their lives or improve their outcomes. And finding very little, I started PPMD in 1994 and continued to this day.
My name is Schikan. I'm CEO for Prosensa. Prosensa is a young, dynamic biopharmaceutical company focusing on rare diseases and with a special focus on Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And I started at Prosensa about 3 years ago, and before that I was working for about 5 years at Genzyme in the rare disease space as well.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be here. My name is Hughes-Wilson. I'm Vice President for Health Policy Europe at Genzyme, so Hans is an ex-colleague. In this role, I'm responsible for health policy in the external environment, and that includes reimbursed patient access. I'm also a member of the EU Committee of Experts on Rare Diseases, which has been established last year by the European Commission with the objective of setting up a harmonized European policy framework, including diagnosis, treatment, and access to treatment for rare diseases across Europe. And I'm also chair of the Joint Industry Task Force on Orphan Drugs and Rare Diseases, of which also Shire is a member, and we're hoping that Prosensa is going to join. But that regroups all of the companies that are involved in the research and development of orphan drugs.
Hi, I'm Jackie Catchick. I'm from Datamonitor's Healthcare Consulting Group. I've been with the group now since 2003, and prior to that, spent a lot of time in industry at GSK as well as ASI London Research Laboratories, where I focused on neurodegenerative disease drug discovery research. Our consultancy group supports biotech and pharma companies, but more recently we've done quite a lot of work in the rare disease space as more companies are navigating this landscape and trying to understand how to better leverage relationships with patient advocacy groups and so on. So our team has very much enjoyed projects in this space and look forward to understanding the landscape more. So it's good to be here. Thank you. So
as we can see, we've got a panel that is steeped in experience in this space. For some of you, the sort of the orphan disease space, I mean, it's what, for example, Prosensa was created doing. Genzyme has actually built a big franchise and is clearly a big player. And through the acquisition of Transkaryotic, Shire also has now moved into that space. However, it's kind of interesting that we now see that big pharmaceutical companies who for a long time had eschewed this area have shown a big interest, certainly over the last sort of 18 months, 2 years. I just as we sort of get a sort of sense of why is this happening and why is it happening now? Jackie, could you kick us off to start with from your experience?
In the pharmaceutical industry traditionally, there's a lot of issues being faced at the moment with patent expiries and traditional small molecules, a lot of challenges facing the industry, and companies have looked, had to look outside of these traditional approaches. And, there's been more activity in the biologic space, and that very much ties in with orphan diseases, where many of the orphan drugs that are getting designations and approval, many of which are, not exclusively, but many are biological drugs. So it's, an approach that that pharma and biotech companies are taking to, as a means to sustain their existence in an increasingly competitive environment due to the level of competition with traditional small molecules.
Hans?
Yeah, just to echo that comment, I think on the one hand, indeed, this is really an area where in the past big pharma companies would never be present in. When I left Genzyme about 3 years ago to go to Prosensa, at my farewell dinner, I heard that, Hans, don't worry, we'll take you back. We hate to see you leave, we'll take you back at a price. So I really was convinced that I would be in a collaboration as Prosensa again with Genzyme. And now we have entered into a collaboration with GSK. Quite surprising to myself as well, where we entered into 2 years ago. I think the reason there is really partly because it's an untapped area. There are some 7,000 diseases, still rare diseases, where there's currently no treatment, and where modern technology really can help those patients as well. I think that's the most important reason, that there are so many diseases here yet which are so far untreatable. And that's where I think that big pharma now sees that opportunity as well, which is great, I think. It's great news for patients.
Genzyme, you guys have just been acquired by a big pharmaceutical company, and clearly the attraction was the orphan disease franchise you have. Did you were you surprised by their interest in the first place?
No, I don't think so. I think Genzyme's a very, very interesting company with a very, very good culture, as Hans can also attest to. And we've had a very successful track record of researching development and also bringing these treatments to patients. I think beyond the actual products and the technology, though, what I understood as one of the attractions was the way that Genzyme and indeed other orphan companies have been able to partner in the whole drug development and reimbursement and access chain. And that's one of the hallmarks, I think, of the orphan drug space that marks it apart from the big pharma, which has tended in the past to have a somewhat more adversarial approach, sometimes with regulators, sometimes with payers. And whether that's a perception or reality, it's certainly the perception. And one of the things that we were told was very, very attractive from Genzyme was our very collaborative approach at all stages of the drug discovery and access chain. So working with patients, working with regulators, working to figure out shared challenges instead of just saying, here's my drug, I want to get it approved, regulators deal with it, or patients, really being able to forge something together.
Right. And Shire, I mean, Shire has in the past been an acquisitive company as it's built different franchises. Orphan diseases was I think, probably a surprise for people, for Shire to go into in the first place. But you guys have been there now in that space for a while through the transcarrier therapeutics. So do you sort of see something changing in the environment, that why orphan diseases now move to the fore?
I tend to agree, first of all, with Hans. I think the underlying thing is that there's still a huge unmet need. And so for any company, be it small or larger, I think there's still a lot of work to do in the area. I also think that many of these rare diseases have a genetic basis. And so I think with the advances in genetics, I think that's the other thing that's making them much more attractive, is that as we understand the science better, so too we begin to understand better how to approach these diseases and find solutions for them.